This is the Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and I'm your host, Y.M. Nelson. Hello, Nerdy Romantics. This episode is going to start the DCTV and DC Universe review. I am starting this because I've just finished catching up with seasons 5 through 7 of The Flash, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my love-hate relationship with the DC TV series and why The Flash pulled me back in. Before we do that, though, two things. One, if you are subscribed to my podcast, which if you're not, why aren't you? Go and do that now. We're at just about every podcast provider. But you'll see my logo has changed a little bit on a couple of episodes, including this one. You'll see now my new logo is a blue background with some pink glasses. And the reason why I did that is because I'm going to be putting out a few more nerdy episodes than I have. And I wanted to denote those particular episodes that are a little more nerdy than romantic. I'm going to use another iteration of my logo to do that. Second thing is, for those who are asking about my show notes, I do send my show notes out in a newsletter monthly. And of course, I do these episodes monthly right now. Also, I want to take this moment to apologize for my November episode not being there. Last month, or November, was NaNoWriMo, which is an organization called National Novel Writing Month, which I participated in vigorously last month. So my podcast episode was supposed to come out in November. Apologies for that. It is now here for December. Back to my second thing, the newsletter. You can subscribe to it at ymnelson.com/subscribe. That's ymnelson.com/subscribe. You will get a quarterly newsletter. I talk a lot about the novels that I'm reading. I give 3 things that I'm nerding out over, which a lot of times they're romance stuff, but sometimes they're nerdy stuff. Every month, I send out my show notes and other news that happens during that month in a monthly digest. If you want show notes when they come out, subscribe to my newsletter. That is ymnelson.com/subscribe. Okay? Before we get too much into The Flash, I want to warn everyone that this episode will have spoilers, as I am reviewing the last couple seasons of The Flash. And I also may put in a few other things about the other DC TV shows. So, spoiler alert, this will have definite Flash spoilers. If you want to catch up, you can do so on Netflix. Seasons 1 through 7 are on Netflix, and then you can come back and let's chat then. So let's get into it. The Flash. Background. I started watching as soon as it came out, first run, started watching it and was hooked for about 4 seasons. The 4th season, I think I had a little bit of burnout. The main villain of the 4th season was the Thinker, and I didn't really like the Thinker. I just didn't really get into that whole season. By that point, I was watching Supergirl and trying to keep up with Supergirl. I had already kind of fallen out of favor with Arrow. And so all of the shows that are DC TV that are on the CW network fall under something that a lot of people call the Arrowverse, because Arrow was the first. So I did start watching Arrow when it first came out, was into it for that first season. The second season of Arrow was also the first season of The Flash, and I loved The Flash a lot more than I loved Arrow. But then Supergirl came out, and so I was watching Flash and watching Supergirl. So that combined with, I guess, a lot of other stuff that was going on about season 4 of The Flash around that year for some reason. And I just kind of fell out of love with The Flash. For the past, I would say from September through October, I said to myself, let's go back and watch The Flash. Let's catch up here and let's see what's going on. I missed the whole Barry and Iris romance, and I was kind of looking for that little sweet kind of romance, kind of corny little romance thing going on with a lot of action adventure. So I went back to season 5. You know, I remember a lot of those episodes. Well, at the end of season 4, there's an introduction of this random girl from Jitters who obviously is going to have something to do with the Flash down the road. So in season 5, we find out that girl is the Flash's daughter from the future, XS, who, you know, it's just a lot of stuff going on in there. A lot of family drama stuff going on in there. So she's come back from the future. She wants to meet her dad. So she's also coming back to try to defeat Cicada, because the Flash, he disappears in Crisis. And we've known this since like the beginning. You know, there's this paper from the future that says the Flash is going to disappear in Crisis, whatever this crisis is. So when the Flash disappears in Crisis, he is fighting Cicada, and Cicada actually never is defeated. Part of the reason why I stopped watching was all of this family drama and all of this stuff kind of going on. And it started, not that the Flash is anywhere near any semblance of reality or any of the science that they talk on the Flash. Felt like it was just kind of going off the rails a little bit. And the thing about time travel, I hate time travel. I mean, I love time travel and I love the whole dynamic, but I hate it as well because, well, if they came back from the future, then wouldn't they change something? And is there a new timeline? And which timeline are they on? And if we don't change anything, what happens? Or even the whole culture behind the time travel. The future person can't meet themselves in the past, or something bad's going to happen. You know, in some instances, they do meet themselves in the past. And then with the Flash, there's also this element is that you can run so fast, you can run backwards in time. But remember from the previous episodes, well, the Flashpoint episodes, season 3 was Flashpoint. And I know from talk and from things that I've read and researched, the Flashpoint season was not done like it was done in the comic book. I'm not really going to bring that up because I think that's a sore spot for comic book readers. FYI, if you haven't heard any of my episodes before, I love superheroes. I love the stories that we see from the superheroes. I love that whole culture. However, I am not a comic book reader. I'm coming from the perspective of I have a respect for the comics. I consider the comics canon. They are the originals. For me, my origin and my love of superheroes started with TV, especially like with Marvel. I started loving the X-Men cartoon. That is how I started. When I saw these cartoons, I wanted to know more. So I did go and look at some comic books, but I am not a comic book reader. I do want to say that I noticed that there are not these ghost-like things coming after them as they're doing time travel. And they do time travel a lot. But there are no time travel guards or whatever. That's just odd to me. I realized that season 5 was kind of the season that broke me a little bit. And I said, you know what? I'm going to come back. I'm going to watch, because I kind of stopped watching around season 5, around the time where they did Infinite Earths. So each season since probably, I think, season 2 of The Flash, they have been doing crossover episodes. So each time we get more of the DC or of the Arrowverse, we get crossover episodes. And so in season 6, there's the Crisis of Infinite Earths. I realized that I had watched basically most of season 5. The crossover, I believe, in season 5 it kind of segued into crossover into the Crisis of Infinite Earths, because it featured the Monitor in the Crisis of Infinite Earths. Well, I'm glad I went back and I watched it. That is really what brought me back to loving The Flash again. And I think a lot of it was because it was full of Easter eggs. Only people who are watching this, or only people who are really nerding out about this or geeking out about this, are really going to understand it. It's almost like you're in like this little secret club, and I love the little Easter eggs. It's just so excited because you know where this particular thing came from. The one that really got me, and of course it's going to, because hello, I'm a Trekkie, is that in I believe that's the Supergirl episode of the Crisis of Infinite Earths, is like this doomsday sayer guy on the street. And he's like, Earth is coming to an end, one of those, it's the end of days kind of doom sayer person, and he's just there for like comic effect or whatever, because Supergirl is doing some other thing and she's just kind of bumps into this doomsayer person, and it turns out to be Will Wheaton. So I'm all geeked out about that, because of course Will Wheaton is the actor who played Wesley Crusher on the Next Generation Star Trek. And he's saying something about something coming out from the stars or something coming up from the sky. And it's just like, and he's like looking towards the sky. And it's so funny, because it's like, I thought that was cool. Some other things from episodes, specifically from Crisis of Infinite Earths, is that there seems to be a creation of the Super Friends. And again, like I said, I'm not a comic book reader, but I grew up on superhero cartoons, and Super Friends was one of those cartoons. Again, it's like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. It was never a comic book, but it was a cartoon. They ended up making a Super Friends comic book from that cartoon. The comic book that came from it, it had its own universe. It was made, they made its own universe from it. And that particular universe, it looks like a lot of what they did in Crisis of Infinite Earths, where they destroyed the multiverse, basically. So, spoiler alert, they destroyed the multiverse. From what I gather, that is what the comic book version of Super Friends ended up doing. There's like an Earth Prime in that. So all of the superheroes are on this one Earth. And so, I kind of thought that was cool. although I have some reservations about it, but ultimately I thought it was really cool that they basically made the Super Friends. I want to see what they do with it, which is why I have some reservation. So another Easter egg that jumped out at me, of course, from Crisis of Infinite Earths, but it's always been there. The Jay Garrick Flash. If you're watching The Flash, you know there is an older Flash that's Jay Garrick. The actor who plays Jay Garrick Flash, he is John Wesley Shipp. Okay, my romance audience is probably going to know him more so for being Dawson's dad on Dawson's Creek. But for my nerdy audience, we also know that in the 90s, I think it was just one season, there was another live action The Flash, kind of like the Hulk and Wonder Woman and Adam West Batman, and the guy who played the Flash in that live action episode is in that live action series. His name is John Wesley Shipp, and it's the same actor. So, that's in most of the episodes. I think it was just interesting because you see him come back. He has a kind of a pivotal role in Crisis of Infinite Earths, and so it just reminded me of that particular Easter egg and why that's cool. Another little Easter egg here. Also on the 90s Flash, Mark Hamill actually played a villain on one episode of the 90s version of The Flash. And we know Mark Hamill is also Luke Skywalker. Star Wars. So, I think that's cool as well. Also, in all of the episodes, Barry Allen and Iris West are just destined soulmates in love. Oh my gosh, they must be together. And that whole love story is fraught with problems. They are just going through stuff, and it's all kinds of ups and downs, and they're dysfunctional, and one of them has superpowers. Well, both of them have superpowers at some point in time. It's a lot going on there with their relationship, which I love. I love people who going through stuff, actually go through stuff, but be just so in love that the love conquers all kind of thing. They're just so disgusting. I love it. It's great. They're just totally disgusting, and it's great. That is one of those things I'm kind of reminded of, especially in season 7. We not only see, Excess, Nora, come back. They've named her Nora, but we also see that they have a son. We actually kind of see them sort of as parents in season 7. They do a few of these little parenting things that is like, oh my gosh. The dad has super speed. These kids have super speed, and you're trying to parent them like regular people. Just like, what? Are you kidding me? And of course, the son is like, I'm going to do what I want. He just stomps off, and it's like, oh my gosh. It's so crazy, and it's so cute. It's so cute to see that the whole evolution of them in the recent seasons, like after they've been married. What I don't like is I don't like the fact that they put Iris in the Mirrorverse. She was actually being this real boss, when she became the editor of The Citizen. And she was like boss. And then they were kind of developing this little team there. Oh man, this is going to be like cool. If they end up being a team, and she kind of has superpowers sometimes too. She gets infused with, super speed at times. And I was like, this is going to be great. And it turns out that at least one of the ladies that she's hired is a metahuman. So that's cool. But they do not let that manifest. So that's part of my issue with how they're kind of treating Iris. I love the love that Barry and Iris have. But in certain instances, Iris is taking that back seat because the show is called The Flash. And I get that the show is called The Flash, but let's give Iris a little bit more backbone because she does have one. She's a black woman, for goodness sake, right? I mean, she's a black woman and she's dealing with all this stuff. No, we're not going to put her in a magical stereotype. We're not going to make her a sapphire or anything like that. But we've already kind of seen that she would not do that. So why are you doing that? I don't understand. That's one of my little gripes. So let's talk about a couple of my other gripes. One of those is that the crossover of Infinite Earths in season 6, I know that they filmed that before Ruby Rose left, right? So it's going to be kind of problematic. So you're watching this, but you know that she's gone. So, and then there's another Batwoman, and now that Batwoman is black. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. First season of Batwoman, there's LGBTQ representation there, which is awesome. Totally down for that. I'm all about it. I'm an ally. I feel that people should just live in their truth, and if that is their truth, then let them live in that truth, and why not show people living in that truth? But now that Ruby Rose is gone, now they have Batwoman being a black woman, and I'm wondering if what they're doing is because they had representation, they had diversity in that role. They were doing that to keep diversity in that role. I'm not sure. I don't know what's going on. I like that there's diversity in that role, but I want you to do it because we need to have representation, not just because you are trying to have a quota of diverse people. That's not what it should be about. It should be about representing people and actually showing representation and doing it because that is your goal. Not we need to make a quota to satisfy whatever people out there in the audience are saying. I'm not sure how I feel about that. We'll see what kind of happens with that. I will say that Batwoman was not one of the shows that I watched. I will say now that I'm trying to stream it and I'm trying to go back and look for it, it is not on Netflix. Batwoman's first season is not, and I don't know why, other than the only thing I can think of is some licensing issue, and I have no idea, but I know that that's the one show in the current Arrowverse that doesn't have any past seasons on Netflix. So I don't really have any judgment there about it. I don't really, it's just kind of a open-ended kind of thing there. I don't really know what's going to happen there. Also, something else that I kind of don't know what's going to happen is the Super Friends, them at the end of Crisis of Infinite Earths, the whole Super Friends creation, because Supergirl is in its final season right now. I don't know if The Flash will be in its final season, but it may be in its final season, or it may only have one more season left after that. So I'm not sure how they are going to use that. It's so great to actually create that whole Super Friends. Such a big Easter egg for us. And I think part of it is pandemic. We're not going to say that the pandemic actually had no bearing on this. It obviously had it took a toll on these shows, and maybe what they created when they created the Super Friends thing can't happen now because the pandemic took such a toll on these shows, and because a lot of the shows that have been on for several seasons are now saying, yeah, we are going to get off this. We're not going to be on this anymore. So I don't know. But I think it's kind of like a missed opportunity for Super Friends to happen. It's a cool thought, but I think at this point it may be a missed opportunity. One thing that you'll need to know if you're going back to stream this is when I was trying to stream Crisis of Infinite Earths, I realized that in order for me to see all the episodes, all the crossover episodes, and this is why I know what's on Netflix right now and what isn't, is because I'm trying to stream the Crisis of Infinite Earths, and I can't stream it because of the way that the episodes aired. It's really cool if you're watching it in real time. It makes sense from a marketing standpoint, and it makes sense from a fan standpoint in real time to have the crossovers cross over. To have, they do this on shows all the time, but when you're streaming, it's weird. Unless the network, it packages those episodes as Crisis of Infinite Earths and has that as a streamed package, which is what I would do, but they are not packaged like that. They're just put out there. It makes sense. If you're just going to sell it and you just go put it out there, it's really not your job after you've licensed it to Netflix for Netflix to then package it where it can be palatable for their consumer. You've already put it out there for your consumer to watch in real time. And it's really cool to have this crisis go throughout the whole week. Each episode aired during the week that it aired on the respective show in which it aired. Supergirl aired on Sunday here, so she has episode 1. Batwoman was episode 2, I believe, aired on Monday. Flash episode 3 aired on Tuesday. Arrow aired on Thursday. Arrow had episode 4. Legends of Tomorrow aired on Thursday, I think, as well, but after, or either on Thursday or Friday. So it had episode 5. When you go back to try to find this is going to be in different seasons of the particular shows. You have to go through and try to figure out what season that show was in and then find the episode in order to watch them in order. As I was binge watching The Flash, I saw Crisis of Infinite Earths and I said, oh, here, I'm ready. So I'm looking at it and it's part 3. So that means I have to go back and try to find part 1. Because I had been watching these in real time at up to a certain point, I knew that Supergirl came on Sunday nights at that point. And so I looked and I found episode 1. A lot of shows do this. They air and then they air the show where you watch the show back to back. Like if you're actually sitting there, you're actually watching it. It totally makes sense. While you're streaming or while you're binge watching it, it doesn't make sense at all. You're going to have to go and pick and find that. And that's why I also know that Batwoman is not on Netflix right now because I can't find that episode. A few things about The Flash that still kind of have me on the fence. Of course, one of my favorite characters was Vibe, Cisco Ramon, and I know that the actor wanted to leave that show, so that's why he's not there anymore. But I'm really hating that he took the cure first and then they had him on for that whole season. Then he was like Mecha Vibe for a little bit, and I was like, what is going on here? It just before he actually left the show, and that was kind of a downer for me. the actor who played that character really well and just made science cool. Let's just say made physics cool. I like science, but made physics cool. Physics is not always cool. And then, his whole interaction with the Harrison Wells is kind of corny and kind of funny, and I love little stuff like that. The other thing that kind of bugs me is a couple of more, I guess, inconsistencies with the villains and with who plays what. And it's because part of it is because the Barry Allen Flash. There are different Flashes because there is a multiverse. Now that the multiverse is gone, I don't know what they're gonna do with Wally West, having them all come together to be the Flash in one episode. I think that was in season 7, was kind of weird. Do they all exist like that in the comic? I think they have their own universes, right? Because it's a multiverse, they're in their own universes. So it's kind of weird when they come together and they coexist. Killer Frost is no longer Killer Frost. She's just Frost. And I don't know when that change actually happened. I mean, I know what season it happened in, but it was just like all of a sudden we're now Frost. We're one of the good guys. And Killer Frost was like an anti-hero, or an anti-villain or whatever. She was a villain, but she was kind of like, she's like Catwoman. Comic book fans out there, tweet me. #Nerdy Romantics Podcast. Post on Instagram, #it Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and let me know how good, how bad, or is she an anti-villain? Is she an anti-hero? What is her whole status? But her being a good person now, I don't think is what happened in the comics. So she was always Killer Frost. So that's weird to me too. I'm going to say after all of that, The Flash did win because I do want to see the next season. I do want to see what happens. I am in it for the long haul. And yes, I did go back and I saw all of the other episodes that I missed. So The Flash did win me over again. Are we raving? Are we, wild and crazy about it? We'll see. But for now, I'm going to say that The Flash won me over on this one. If you liked The Flash these past few seasons, if you liked Crisis of Infinite Earths, or if you didn't, tweet about it. #Nerdy Romantics Podcast so I can find you. Post it on Insta. #Nerdy Romantics Podcast. I love to see what you think about The Flash. And I'd also love to see what you'd like to hear me talk about next as far as DCTV and the DCU. I know we will have some review episodes about Titans, which is now showing on HBO Max. I will have a guest host to talk back and forth with about Titans. I'm excited about that. What else would you like to see in this mini series I'm titling DCTV and DCU? Let me know. So that's it for this episode. Please subscribe to Nerdy Romantics Podcast wherever you get your podcasts to be notified anytime a new episode drops. And if you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. The links are in my show notes at ymnelson.com, along with a lot of other links for books and other items that we talked about on our show. And if you really like what you're hearing, click the Buy Me a Coffee button while you're there to support us. Thank you for listening.